The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. It is Wednesday, July the 1st, 2026. We've got a great show for you today. We are live here at CHD TV. In just a moment, I'm going to be bringing on our senior scientist, Karl Jablonowski, and then we're going to go to Miriam Axfeld for her EMR update. She's got some fantastic guests on this morning, Rob Brown, Shandy and Kelly Lee McFrederick. And then we're going to go to Mothers to Be with Isabella Yon. They're going to be talking about picky eaters with Shandy Waters. But first of all, let's cover this first piece of news, which is breaking. And it's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has signed terminations ending the COVID-19 Emergency Use Authorization for drugs, biologics, and medical devices. So who better to talk to us about this than Karl Jablonowski? Good morning, Karl.
Good morning, Polly.
What does that mean, what I just read out?
Yeah, so that means the EUA that's been in practice for 6 years is going to end. And if you're actually believing that we needed an emergency use authorization to shortcut all of the safety protocols we have before we bring, pharmaceuticals or therapeutics to market, then yesterday was your victory day. And I have to say the reaction by media is a deafening silence. No one has picked this up. No major or minor news outlets are running with this story. So there is a phase out to ending the EUA, and it's a pretty long phase out. For medical devices, it's 180 days before medical devices that were covered under the EUA are no longer covered. And for biological products, which include vaccines, it's 1 year. So on July 1st of 2027, those products will no longer be covered by the EUA. And it has some impacts. They're for some of them it's minor because Paxlovid and Remdesivir are already fully FDA approved. But for the COVID-19 vaccines, they're not fully approved for every age. Moderna is approved at 18 and older, and Novavax and the Pfizer-BioNTech are approved for 12 and older, which means unless that changes, come July 1st of 2027, kids under 12 years old will no longer be able to be vaccinated for a COVID-19 vaccine unless a medical doctor uses an off-label use of those vaccines, which is awfully risky because they would not then be covered by all of the liability shields that other vaccines have. So otherwhere in the news, yesterday, Dr. Belletti published in The Defender an article on obesity management. Now, this is a study that looked at health, behavior, lifestyle treatment, and a whole slew of pharmaceuticals that are used to curb obesity, which includes all of the GLP-1 receptor antagonists. And what they found was that purely the health, behavior, lifestyle treatment itself, which is an effort for sustained changes to nutrition and physical activity and habits, wins over everything else, except for one, which was phentermine, which is chemically and pharmacologically similar to amphetamines. But the addition on top of that, the lifestyle treatment of all of the GLP-1 drugs that we use does not even grow to be statistically significantly benefit, and yet the authors are advocating for their use. The next topic that I would talk about was in June of 16th of 2021, a 13-year-old in Michigan went to sleep and didn't wake up. He died of myocarditis 3 days after his second Pfizer dose. He joins another teenager, a 16-year-old from Connecticut, Micah Williamson, in a case report. Micah died of myocarditis 4 days after his second Pfizer dose. Now, the safe and effective propaganda machine couldn't let that stand. And so the CDC, in a huge overreach of authority, found bacteria growing in a tissue sample and overruled the medical examiner on Jacob's medical determination. And the USA Today ran with that. They ran with it. Quote, Michigan teen's death fueled anti-vaccine rhetoric, even though USA Today did not cover his initial death. Similarly, in Micah's death, it was misattributed to parvo B19 virus, which is an exceptionally common virus. So both cases actually stand out as myocarditis that had appeared with sudden onset, and the deaths were without underlying symptoms. Senator Johnson's document release a few weeks ago showed the FDA is actually contradicting the CDC. The FDA said that Micah's parvovirus was frequently detected in autopsies, and the death was possibly related to COVID-19 vaccines. And with Jacob's sample, they determined it was more likely that the bacteria had an overgrowth post-mortem. Now, this is a huge deal that I'm sure USA Today will not cover, that the FDA is overruling the CDC, which had no business overruling the medical examiners. The next topic I wanted to touch on, Dr. Hooker mentioned last week, was the dementia and shingles connection. So a group of scientists analyzed data from people who had received shingles vaccine and who had not, and determined that dementia was severely decreased in those who had received the vaccine. What Brian said last week was that people who opt for a shingles vaccine are often the healthier ones. And in this case, wow, I read through that, and there is the odds of dying, mortality, was twice that in the unvaccinated than it was in the vaccinated. So that is a clear separation that your cohorts are not even comparable, because your unvaccinated are unhealthy and they're dying at twice the rate. It has nothing to do with the vaccine. They could have spun this that the shingles vaccine prevents mortality. But what I found awfully striking was that this study was paid for by a $1.7 million grant from GlaxoSmithKline, who manufactures the shingles vaccine. And in this country, there are about 80 million people who are over the age of 60 who could be getting the shingles vaccine. And that's about $40 billion in profit, because both shingles vaccines would cost about $500. Only about half of that population is vaccinated. So GlaxoSmithKline believes they're leaving $20 billion on the table. And this was a giant advertisement stunt by them, but they're using science to propagate that advertisement. And wow, did it work, because almost every major media outlet and a lot of the smaller ones picked up on it and ran with it. The next article I wanted to mention was from Dr. Burdick from The Defender, and it had to do with the genetic origins of autism. Polly, I did not believe these people actually existed who had such a narrow worldview. In the scientists' worldview, autism explosion is caused either by genetics or overdiagnosis, nothing else. So what they did was they conducted a genetic analysis of people who had like genetically susceptible diseases like schizophrenia or bipolar, and they examined, they created a model and showed that, from decades ago, that model still works. in people who are diagnosed with bipolar or schizophrenia. However, when they examined autism, the model that was created initially no longer works. And so they correctly surmised that genetics is not the driver of the autism explosion. In their limited worldview, that means they interpret that to mean only overdiagnosis is responsible for the autism explosion, which is so narrow-minded. Literally, it's hard. Yeah, it's hard to believe that people like this exist who call themselves scientists and can run a scientific study and ignore all of the other environmental toxins that could be playing into the autism epidemic explosion. And when we talk about an explosion, it's usually in the past. Our autism explosion is not over yet. It is still exploding. It is still exponentially growing.
Karl, can I just say something on that for a second?
Please.
For me, it's as simple as this. My son he's 30 now. He was diagnosed 29 or 28 years ago by the time they diagnosed him. And at the time they diagnosed him, no one could tell me what autism is. I had to go to a library, and the librarian said there are no books on it. She didn't know what it was, and I had to find a medical book and look up autism in there. So if these people were there before, how come no one knew about autism? No one had heard of it.
I know the popular explanation that autism is solely genetic lays insult to everyone who has observed human health in our entire human history. Autism is new. It is caused by modern innovations.
And also, can you have a genetic epidemic?
You cannot have a genetic epidemic that explodes right in your face. That can't work.
So are they just panicking because they're really running out of options here? But I mean, they used to blame on refrigeration mothers, that were the horrible mothers, and I don't know, old dads, bad sperm, bad breast milk. I mean, they've tried everything.
Right. And I think they're going to continue trying everything. And I don't know what to do about people who can't open their eyes and take a look around and entertain other ideas. I mean, the whole premise of science is that you're objective and you're looking at things objectively. This area of science is clearly not acting objectively.
Did you have another headline?
Yes, there's a headline from Dr. Belletti in the Defender again that this pneumococcal vaccine, which is going to be manufactured by Merck, is going to be administered to at-risk kids about 2. Now, this vaccine is the technology it uses what's called CRM197, which is a really horrible name. It comes from diphtheria. Diphtheria, the bacteria, was it belongs to a family of bacteria that was among the first life to evolve. And it lives pretty well in soil and mucous membranes when they came about. And it is mostly harmless until it's infected with a virus. And that virus gives it instruction to make a toxin. And that toxin moves into other cells and has a toxic effect. Now, in the 1970s, researchers at Harvard mutated the instructions to make that toxin. So it entered a cell, but did not have the toxic effect. And that is now what's called a carrier protein. Researchers can, bind something to that protein and have it move into a cell and then study it. And that's great for understanding, molecular biology. It is, awful questionable technology for children's vaccines. And so one of the first vaccine that used this technology was Hib titer. They took a piece of the Hib pathogen and stuck it to this protein so it can enter a cell and presumably not have a toxic effect. However, CHD Science did a really thorough deep dive into Hib titer, and it was by far so much worse than all other Hib vaccines. And we think it's because of CRM197. To our horror, that technology is used in the Pfizer's pneumococcal line. The Prevnar 7 was the first time it was the first one of those lines developed. And that trial was run by Dr. Black, who said that it was not placebo-controlled due to ethical concerns requiring more than 15,000 control patients having to receive 4 doses with no potential for benefit. And, you know, on one hand, I agree. I understand where he's coming from, because I also don't want to be jabbed 4 times for no benefit. But that's science. And it's important to move forward with the practice of science the best we can. And this was not the best we can. So the other thing that he chose to vaccinate kids with that would have some potential for benefit was a meningococcal vaccine. It was experimental. We actually don't know the contents of it because it was never approved. In the bombshell, that meningococcal vaccine uses the CRM 197. So during the trial, 1,188 children had an emergency room visit within 30 days after the vaccination, and 1,092 children were hospitalized within 60 days after the vaccination. And we don't have a control. We don't know, how that would look different if they didn't just receive a CRM 197 technology vaccine, because the study was either designed to not detect a signal, or it was not designed to detect it. And our last the last story that I wanted to mention was Voices for Vaccines is criticizing Children's Health Defense. They are quote unquote fact checkers, so we are fact checking the fact checkers. And Voices for Vaccines has Stanley Plotkins, who is the person in vaccines, and Paul Offit, who is also pretty prominent in vaccine promotion, on their scientific advisory board. Voices for Vaccines is funded by the CDC and Big Pharma, GlaxoSmithKline, Pfizer, Sanofi, Merck, Moderna, and a trade organization which captures all the rest of them. Now, they're criticizing our infant death study, and they say, the first one is that we didn't give a medical reasons for why the children died. Well, it was an all-cause mortality study, so the reason the children died were all causes. The second one was that we had a narrow definition of what constituted vaccinated, such as science. We work with narrow definitions. The third was that some of our confidence intervals crossed 0, meaning they weren't statistically significant, which is true. Some of them did. However, a lot of them didn't. For rotavirus, for blacks, males, and females, they were all statistically significant, attributed to mortality. For females, DTaP, Hib, polio, pneumococcal, all attributed to mortality. For all children of the 5 first vaccines the CDC recommends at 2-month, and for some of the multi-vaccines associated with mortality. Our study of 1,225 child deaths should be considered small, but it is the largest data set ever assembled on early infant mortality and immunizations. And, if the safe part of safe and effective were true, we shouldn't have found a single safety signal, let alone 18 of them. Now, the sincerity with which Voices for Vaccines addresses infant death falls just as short as their mudslinging.
Karl, I can't thank you enough for the amazing update there on Science Update and all the work that you're doing, and it's so important that we put right all of these ridiculous headlines. So thank you so much for being on this morning. We truly appreciate you.
Thank you, Polly.
And to the audience here, talking about putting things right, I just want to say we do read the chat. And for the person who said that Brian Burrows was my husband, he is not. My husband is Jonathan Tommy, who runs the Autism Trust USA. Just going to put this out in the open, seeing as it's getting a bit twitchy out there. My daughter is Isabella Yon. She is Mothers to Be host. My son Billy it has vaccine injuries. So he's 30 and he looks after chickens. And my son Toby is the producer on Vax 2, Vax 3, and Duty to Disobey. So there you go. That's my family. It is not Brian Burrows. We do read the chat and we love you all. And thank you so much for being here every morning for us. But now I'm going to hand over to Miriam. Good morning, Miriam. And here's her EMR segment.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to another EMR and Wireless segment. My name is Miriam Eckenfels, and I am the director of CHD's EMR and Wireless program. Before we jump into today's conversation with our guests, Dr. Shandy Bond and Kelly Lee McFrederick, two experts on the impact of cell towers on property values, we're going to talk about a recent book, and we're joined by a very special guest, Dr. Rob Brown, who is the author of Unplug. Unplug is a radiologist explores the damage caused by electropollution and how you can prevent it. And Dr. Brown is drawing on decades of experience in radiology as he examines the growing body of research surrounding electromagnetic fields and microwave radiation from cell phones, Wi-Fi, in our ever-expanding world of networks and connected devices. So join me in welcoming Dr. Rob Brown. Hey, Rob. It's a pleasure to have you. As an MD and radiologist, can you tell us a little bit about the book and what prompted you to write it?
I was first introduced to the idea that electromagnetic fields and radiofrequency radiation could cause health effects back in 2014 when I went to a conference and there was an all-day seminar on this topic and how this type of radiation doesn't cause direct ionization like X-rays and gamma rays, which is what I was most familiar with, but it actually causes something called oxidative stress. And when I found that out, I was very concerned because, of course, our technology was moving in the direction of exposing more and more people to increasing intensities and frequencies of this radiation. And I just wanted to make sure first that I was protecting myself and my family. But then as I learned more, I started thinking I really needed to use my expertise to contribute to this field and not necessarily warn people, but educate people.
That's awesome. So walk our viewers through the book. What subjects does it cover? Why should they buy it? What can they expect when they embark on the Unplug journey?
Well, this is a very confusing topic because it really bridges 4 different disciplines: medicine, biology, engineering, and physics. And so if you go onto the internet and you read a couple of pages about this topic, you may not have the background to really understand what you're reading. And people are always looking for instructions. Well, what do I do? But I'm more about why do you need to do what you need to do? And so I like to explain things. And the book is really geared to educate and in a basic way so that non-scientists can understand these complex topics. And that was my goal. So I start with an introduction and I talk about visible light and how our interaction with light affects our body's systems through circadian rhythms. Because that's something we can all appreciate. And visible light is a form of electromagnetic radiation. It's one that we've evolved in, and so our bodies work with it, as does the flora and fauna out there in our environment. So it's a really educational and easy to understand corollary to the wireless radiation that we're now being exposed to. And so after I talk about light, then I go into extremely low fields of electromagnetic radiation, which includes the radiation coming from our electricity and our power lines, and then something called dirty electricity, which is when those lines become contaminated with higher frequencies. And then I work my way into radio frequency radiation and talk about cell phones, Wi-Fi routers, cell towers, everything that's now in our environment. It was at one time limited to the outdoors. We had radio stations and TV stations broadcasting, but now we've brought this wireless infrastructure into our actual homes. And where once it was only CB enthusiasts who had this form of energy irradiating themselves and their family when they were using the technology, now we have, I mean, everybody's being exposed. Some people are even sleeping with their phones in their bed. And I try to explain why that's not a good idea, particularly for our children. So I think the book is really important for everyone to read so that they understand how and why they should protect themselves.
Yeah, and I love that because I think even like explaining sort of like the different spectrums and how radiation works and how it impacts the health in a easy to understand way that non-scientists can understand and learn as you do it in the book is so important. And thank you very much for writing it. It is an important book, so tell us, where can our viewers order it?
It's for sale pretty much everywhere books are being sold. Certainly Amazon is selling it and Barnes & Noble, but there's many independent bookstores around the country that are selling it, and Walmart, Kmart, lots of other stores are also selling it too. So you can pretty much get it anywhere.
That's awesome. So I encourage everyone, go get yourself a copy of the book. It's a great summer read and it brings you up to speed in all you need to know about RF radiation, wireless, and how to unplug. So thank you very much, Rob, for coming on and talking to us about it. And thank you again for writing this book.
Thank you, Miriam. Appreciate it.
All right, now let's move on to our main topic today. As many of you know, those who are watching this segment religiously, June has been dedicated to raising awareness about cell towers and the ways that they affect our communities, particularly property values of the homes nearby. So today's main discussion is going to be around the impact of cell towers on property values. So joining us for this discussion are two experts. One is Shandy of the University of South Florida, whose research there has explored the relationship between cell towers and residential property values. And then we'll also be joined by Kelly Lee McFrederick, who is a owner broker of Beach Natives International Real Estate in Florida. And she brings to the table this firsthand experience of working with buyers and selling, navigating the concerns of having properties that are so close to cell towers. So welcome to both of you. I want to start with Shandy. Shandy, could you give us a very brief introduction of yourself and how you came to look into cell towers and property values?
Sure. Thank you very much for having me. Yes, I'm currently a professor of real estate, actually, at University of South Florida as of a month ago. Prior to that, I was at Bucknell University running their real estate program. But you can probably tell from my accent that I'm actually originally from New Zealand, which is actually where I did my research on the impact of cell phone towers on property values. Prior to that, I looked at the impact of high voltage transmission lines, and my Ph.D. is actually on assessing stigma related to remediated contaminated land. I know that's a long title, but that's what I've been doing. So most of my research really looks at the impact on value of what we call disamenities. So more recently, I've worked on looking at earthquakes and how they impact on property value. And of course, having lived here in Florida for a number of years, looking at the impact of flooding on property values, of course, obviously through climate change. But I got into the cell phone tower research partly because there'd been a lot of media attention to the impact of cell phone towers on health. There was a professor at the University in Christchurch, New Zealand, who was writing in the media that it caused cancer. Whether it does or doesn't, people saw that. And as you probably know, media amplifies any concerns, and we call that stigma. It's basically risk perception. So I'm an appraiser by background, but I've been an academic for over 30 years. But I would like to call myself like more of a real estate economist. So I look at the impact on property value of all these types of things. So that was basically my research. So really, it is very case specific. My research was in Christchurch, where the media attention was very negative. And that's also when the cell phone towers were just being built. So as you probably remember, they were very, very big and they were very ugly. So that's another part of it. Aesthetics, what they look like, how close you live to these towers, the size of them. Yes, that's a very good example of one here. And actually, I have just moved to a community in Tampa that has one that looks like that. But luckily, it's built in a corridor with a high voltage transmission lines are. And that is probably the better place for them, in a corridor away from home. So my research did show that the impact on value was quite significant if you lived close to a pylon. But I was really looking at those big, ugly ones, exactly just like that. And it showed a negative impact. On average, we looked at a number of different suburbs in Christchurch, and it did change a little bit. But on average, the impact was about 15%. But I do want to reiterate, this is case specific, and it was after the negative media attention by the professor, but also there'd been 2 legal cases against a telco company that was trying to erect these towers. Right. So all of that media attention, of course, impacted negatively, and people, believed or thought there was impact on health. But really, whether there is or whether there isn't, I'm not an epidemiologist, so I can't, talk to that. But people's perceptions is what impacts property values very strongly.
Right. And that is so interesting and so significant too, because up to 15%, I mean, we understand that it's case specific, and we use that in a lot of the litigation in communities that we represent. But it is this perception, even for those of our clients who don't believe in the health impact of RF radiation, we've discovered that really nobody wants to live close to a cell tower. So I want to bring Kelly Lee into this discussion. Kelly, same question to you. Can you briefly tell us a little bit about your background and how you came into looking at cell towers and what your experience has been selling homes close to cell towers?
Sure. Thank you very much, Kelly Lee McFrederick. And how I got into this was I had a 60-foot pole cell tower put in 30 feet from the front of my home. I live in a very historic neighborhood. I'm on the waterfront. My water is across the street from me. And my docks, I have 200 feet of seawall. My docks are behind me, or actually in front of the home. And the cell tower was 10 feet, as a 60-foot pole, 10 feet from my docks and 30 feet from my home. That's how I just came home one day. My neighbor said, what are you doing to your house? No knowledge, no asking, no nothing, no saying, being warned, and all of a sudden all the trucks are there. And anyway, called the sheriff, went through all of that. Through the power of Florida Realtors and working a lot with Florida Coalition, Representative Cheney, I was actually able to get the components removed in the cell tower. They put a new one in at 60 feet. We're able to get it down to the normal line of a utility pole, and basically, quote, promised they would never put the equipment on the tower. Once I got the tower the size down, that did help tremendously, that they really cannot put it on. That was a big deal. It took about a year out of my life. And what we have learned, so I got very, very involved trying to help other homeowners that are in the same situation, and obviously working with buyers and sellers who do have a cell tower. What can we do? And just a few stats to tell you, National Association of Realtors, we look at a 7 to 10% drop in values. This is within 0 to 328 feet of a home. Mine was 30 feet. That was huge. And I just knew, basically, I was just going to be radiated living here. And I'd not had my home very long, a beautiful home. I did not want to sell it. And basically was told to just evacuate the home, just leave, just go. And that's not what we wanted to do. So I did put up the fight. But what we're learning in Florida, the recent stats have really come to, we're looking at 15 to 20% less in property values here in Florida, especially South Florida, any of the coastal areas where I am, back to if you're between 0 and 328 feet. And importantly, when we talk about the property value loss, it's also one about the visibility that Sandy was talking about. They're ugly. We don't want them. Mine was put on the intercoastal right-of-way, on the intercoastal water in the right-of-way, on the tiny, tiny right-of-way that we had. They traded out. They traded out a lot because you can't put just a telecom tower, and it's a shared utility pole. So they took the utility pole, quote, shared it so that they could get as far as they could, as close to the homes as they could within all of these neighborhoods. And so that was part of it. But the fall line, we'll talk about that with insurance. So if it's 60 feet, 30 feet from my house, where's it going to fall? On my house or my docks? So that was a big piece. And this is where folks are really starting to lose a lot of their property values. They are aware of it. And I am such an advocate, obviously, of I don't even want people, I'm steering them away from condos that have just flooded the top of their roofs with this. I said, you don't want to be radiated the rest of your life. This is not what you want. It's just a it's a very ugly industry. And we also, in Florida here recently, they're putting them near the schools. They're giving the schools a bunch of money to rent out a piece of land indefinitely. So we're hurting our neighborhoods and our schools, and that's really what we're looking at. So we do know that there is a proven process value. Think about this, my house is worth $2 million. So at an immediate 20% loss, I've already lost 400,000. Now my pole was 30 feet, 60 feet high. Do you think anybody wants it on the intercoastal waterway that you got to walk by this, have the EMF? That's why I was told to just leave my home. It was unsellable. So it took a lot to get it down. And think about a $500,000 house, you would be down 20%. You just immediately lost 10,000 plus what they're going to negotiate. And actually, who would want the home?
Right.
And
That's
we don't
exactly
come to
the
St. Pete
point.
Beach, Florida. Yeah, sorry, man. We just don't come to St. Pete Beach, Florida to live with these telecom towers. It's terrible.
Right. And I think that's really a good point too, that like, when you are looking at homes, I think more and more people are conscious of, high voltage power lines, of
They
cell
are.
towers, of other environmental pollutants. And when you look at homes, like I certainly did that when I purchased my home, a lot of my friends did, right? You look around and you decide. So these homes tend to stay on the market longer, and they tend to like drop in price. So it's really, it's really a significant impact. Talk to us, Kelly Lee, about what you mentioned, the fall zone and the insurance, because that's another really massive component, that the insurance costs for homes close to cell towers seem to go up, the property insurance, right?
That's really a big piece where we were able to get some of the city commissioners' attention, the mayor's attention on this, because I'm just going to jump to the end for a moment. We were able to help pass, we created and wrote, Miriam knows, all these folks here know, we did work on an ordinance to help our city of St. Pete Beach to really help block the cell phone towers out of our neighborhoods. And one of the components that made our city commissioners listen to this was the insurance piece. Because if I'm going to have this tower that's 30 feet away, 60 feet high, and they do catch on fire, we had 8-foot floods here in the last 2 hurricanes, unfortunately. And the box they were putting on for the 5G was only about 4 feet high. I do not understand that. I'm on an 8-foot flood. We've had other no-name storms. That box is going to get flooded. What's going to happen to that? Is it going to catch on fire? Is it going to fall? Is because of the flooding? I have some engineer come to my house because some of the plates in my house, the foundation moved a little bit with the flooding. You don't think this tower would have moved as well. And so when it does fall or it catches on fire, falls on either my docks at 10 feet, which I have a huge boat out there goes that insurance, or my house, who's going to actually pay for the insurance? Because we're going to have a subrogation. My homeowner's insurance will start, but then they're going to go against Duke and AT&T, and then who is going to actually be paying the insurance bill on that? When they started to cut my tower down, I told you I lowered the tower, it actually fell on my seawall. So we immediately put a suit against Duke, and Duke went, not my fault, not mine, it's not mine, not mine. So that, we got a big hint of no one's going to be responsible for any of this. And so what's going to happen is insurance companies, as claims are being made, what's going to happen is our state of Florida is going to write new language into insurance. And what they're going to say is, we're not going to insure any kind of property that has a telecom tower within a certain distance from their home, within that fall line that can fall on any kind of property. So we know that the language could be changed, the insurance rates could go up. So it's a lot of negative out there that could cost the homeowner a lot more money. And again, that goes back to what Sandy was saying, that we cannot sell. It's very hard to sell a home when you know that your insurance is going to be double of your neighbors or triple, or you just get canceled. You have an uninsurable home. So that means I can only sell to a buyer who has cash, who doesn't want flood insurance, doesn't want insurance. willing to live within the radiation in a fall zone. This is what we're doing to our property values.
Right. And that is really wild. And I want to circle back to you, Sandy, because the study that you have done is hugely important. And we cite it a lot, actually, in cases when we fight cell towers individually on the local level. So I want to learn a little more about like the methodology that you used when you conducted the study. Can you walk us through sort of like how you came to the conclusions that you drew?
Sure. Yeah. So the initial study we did in 2003 was a parallel study. First of all, we interviewed or surveyed residents in the area about how they thought it would impact on property value. And then secondly, we used what we call a hedonic modeling study, which is really basically multiple regression, to look at or to tease out the impacts of the tower. Unfortunately, back in those days, we didn't have great technology, but a year later, I think it was just a year later, 2004. So we're talking a while ago. We were able to use GIS, which measures the actual distance of the tower to the homes. And we found that over 300 meters away, it had no effect. And 300 meters converts to about 900 feet from a tower, which is probably close to what Kelly Lee was saying about much closer is a bigger impact. But we're talking about the large towers. I mean, there's so many towers now that are either hidden or they're much smaller, which seem to indicate very little, if any, impact. I did replicate the study about a year later, 2005, when I was on sabbatical in Florida, in Orlando, actually. And the impact was either insignificant or very small, partly because the difference between New Zealand and Florida, or America generally, is they have a lot of the big, what do you call them, signs on the side of the road. What do you call that? Basically visual pollution, which we don't really have in New Zealand so much. So it was case study specific. It was quite a long time ago, but I understand Kelly Lee's concerns. It's very much we don't want to be living near, but it definitely relates to aesthetic, how big they are, the style of them, all have an impact. And I did want to refer to my book that I wrote on all of the various research that I've done, not only on the there we are, the towers, turbines, and transmission lines impact on property values. And so that was edited by myself, some colleagues in England, Sally Sims and Peter Dent. They're at the University of Oxford Brookes, and that came out in 2014. But yeah, that is available on Amazon or pretty much anywhere you want to. If you just Google it, you'll be able to find the book, and that talks about all of those different things and how they impact primarily on house prices.
That is fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing that with us too, Sandy. I encourage people to really dive into the subject because our homes are our biggest investment. For most people, the home is where they, create their families, where they live, where they learn, and where they invest a large portion of their money. And so it's important that we take care of it and that we keep harmful infrastructure from where it really does not belong. So thank you both very, very much for helping us understand this subject, for coming on, for sharing your experience, and for being active in this space. It's hugely important. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having us.
Appreciate it.
So now before I let everyone go, I just want to very quickly remind you that our action alerts telling President Trump, Congress, and the FCC to stop putting wireless infrastructure where it does not belong until the FCC complies with the 2021 court order to revise its outdated RF exposure standards is still active. And it is important that we let our elected officials know that this is a subject we want them to care about for whatever reason you care about it, right? Whether it be property value, whether it be health, whether it be aesthetic, whether it be fire risk, whether it be flood risk. It is important that they hear from you, their constituents. So go ahead and take that action alert. The link is in the show notes. And then also go follow us on social media. We're on all major platforms at Stop 5G Near Me and at 704 No More. And you can also sign up to our newsletter at 704nomore.org so that you will receive all of the important updates, monthly campaigns, etc. And with that being said, I'm now handing over to another segment of Mothers to Be.
Good morning, CHD TV. It's Bella here, and welcome back to our Mothers to Be segment, where we chat all things from preconception, pregnancy, postpartum, and that precious first year of life. I am joined today by the wonderful dear Shandy. She's from Speaking of Health and Wellness, and we're going to be chatting about picky eating and all things kind of feeding and holistic nutrition when it comes to little ones. So welcome, Shandy. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for asking me to join you, Bella. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so excited to have you. So for people who may not know of you and the amazing work that you do you mind just kicking us off by introducing yourself and just telling us a little bit about the work you do with children and families?
Yes, absolutely. So my name is Shandy. I am a speech-language pathologist specializing in pediatric feeding disorders as well as neurodevelopmental conditions. So I also am a functional nutritional therapy practitioner. And so in practice, my work does not look like traditional speech language pathology. It looks more like health coaching or holistic nutrition development and feeding coaching. And so, yeah, my work with families, I work with kiddos who have complex picky eating and not a synonymous term, but also kiddos who have pediatric feeding disorders. And many of the children I see also have developmental conditions co-occurring with complex picky eating. Not all, but some. And so I help parents really look at what are the root causes underlying that complex picky eating and how can we support them in a very whole child, family-centered way that then we can get over that obstacle of complex picky eating and start to personalize their diet. Many of the families that I work with actually want to come to me for nutrition work, thinking things like the gluten-free, casein-free diet, and beyond that for kiddos with autism, Down syndrome, PANS, PANDAS, etc., various neurodevelopmental conditions. But yeah, many of them find transitioning to a special diet very difficult because of this layer of complex picky eating. And so over time, my niche area has really become complex picky eating, in addition to the nutritional pieces of it. But really, I got so tired of seeing very cookie cutter advice online for kiddos who had more complex feeding challenges. And so I felt I needed to address it. And I feel like I've developed sort of an approach and a framework that really meets these parents where they are so they can meet their child where they are.
Amazing, amazing. Well, we're so grateful for the work that you do. And I love that you tackle that root cause because I know also that's so important. So let's chat picky eating. I think a lot of parents hear the term picky eating and think that it's something very normal that toddlers go through. Can it be normal? And what's the difference between like a typical just picky eater and something that's perhaps more complex and needs to be looked into?
Great question. Before I dive into that, I want to just highlight the fact that as a feeding specialist, I kind of get the ick from the term picky eating. I honestly do. But you'll see me use it all over the language in my content because this is the term that parents are searching for, right?
Sure.
As a culture, this is what we call it.
Sure.
But for some kiddos, the kiddos that I see, the term picky eating really minimizes what they're going through in a way,
Mm-hmm.
But to answer your question, yes, absolutely. Picky eating can be a typical developmentally appropriate stage that all toddlers through the preschool age will go through. And think of that as, the picky eating, it comes and goes.
Mm-hmm.
It might be annoying, but you're not going to lose sleep over it. You're not going to go into your pediatrician's office just to talk about picky eating. It might be the situation where, and I'm sure many moms listening are familiar with this, where they like a food one day, they don't want it the next day. But then the very next day after that, they're good with it again. And it's just sort of like annoying, but again, you're not going to lose sleep over it. These kiddos typically have at least 30 foods. The quality of life isn't really impacted by this picky eating, if you will.
Yeah.
And on the flip side of it, essentially the opposite of everything I just said is true for the kiddos who I would consider more complex picky eaters. So when I say complex, I'm thinking kiddos who have any sort of chronic health diagnosis or symptoms, even if they don't have a diagnosis. But if your child has chronic health symptoms that they've had for quite some time and they're a complex picky eater, it's probably correlated, and I would consider it more complex. Similarly, a kiddo with a developmental condition or developmental delay who has a complex picky eating. And I would say for those kiddos, it's like, yeah, they could be going through that developmentally appropriate phase. But again, we're going back to, is it creating a quality of life issue? Is it consistently and persistently creating a quality of life issue for the child and or the family?
Yeah.
How many foods are they eating? If they're eating less than 20 foods, that's complex picky eating. If picky eating has created any sort of quality of life issue for more than a month, then that's complex picky eating. These are kids that they're going to have really strong preferences, really strong cravings. They like what they like, and they're not really open to other foods.
Interesting. Okay. And what kind of ages are you seeing these things crop up, or is it all ages? I mean, let's talk about what age group are we talking about here?
Honestly, that could be any age. I mean, we've got kiddos who are looking at an ARFID diagnosis, which is technically an eating disorder diagnosis, but we often see this with the overlap of kiddos with autism, but that can happen. Sometimes it happens in kiddos who are teenagers. So is that exactly synonymous with complex picky eating? Depends on the kid, depends on the case. But primarily the kiddos that I'm seeing are ages 2 to 12.
Fascinating. Okay. And if you're a parent and you're thinking, okay, I don't think this is just normal picky eating, maybe it's impacting my quality of life. Maybe it's like a whole food group for a long period of time. What's the next step? Like, where do you even start here as a parent who is having a kid going through this?
Yeah, so that's a huge question, right? Because there could be a number of different factors that are underlying a kid's very complex picky eating. And so you sort of have to do some detective work and figure out how to meet your child where they are. So above the surface strategies, right? I'm thinking, like, when I say that, I'm thinking of the iceberg theory of 10% above the water is what you see versus 90% underwater, you don't see it. So what is that above the water stuff that we can work on? Things that impact behavior and environment. So I call this the behavioral environmental realm, because environment impacts behavior and behavior impacts environment.
Yeah.
This is the parent's behavior, the parent's own nervous system regulation, the attitude and the vibe of the siblings that are there, the environmental factors like the lighting, right? Are we in bright fluorescent lighting? Are we in LED lighting? Are we in natural lighting, incandescent? Like, some of these kids have sensory processing challenges where they're sensitive to very bright fluorescent lighting or aggressive types of lighting. Similarly, sense, right? If you have a kiddo who has a sensory processing issue and you just sprayed Febreze and you also just wiped down the kitchen table with a Clorox wipe, your kiddo may have some dysregulation just coming to the meal, and it looks like a behavioral problem at meal times, but it's really a sensory overwhelm. And so I have a framework that I would love to share that we can just sort of think about what are these root causes of complex picky eating. So as I mentioned, it's behavioral environmental. And as I'm going through this, think of a Venn diagram of overlapping circles that form 5 circles forming a flower.
Okay, got it.
And I purposefully created this visual like that because I wanted it to represent all of the what I consider root cause category domains of complex picky eating, but that they overlap with each other.
Okay.
So the idea is, where would you plot your child in this Venn diagram of overlapping root causes, right? And at the center of it all, what connects it all is the nervous system.
Okay.
So behavioral, environmental,
Yeah.
trauma. So that's things like, well, let me go through them all and I'll come back. So trauma reasons, medical reasons, biochemical nutritional reasons, and structural functional reasons.
Okay.
So we talked about behavioral environmental. Trauma reasons would be big T trauma or little t trauma. So big T trauma, think things like neglect, food hunger. Most of the times this is seen primarily in kiddos who went through adoption, foster care, abuse, that type of thing. Little T trauma, though, can be anything like, last year, my kid choked on steak and it was super scary for them. And now they just are terrified of steak.
Okay.
That's not a trauma to us as an adult, but for a child, their body perceived the experience as a trauma, even if they can't completely articulate that. Medical, pretty self-explanatory. This is any known medical condition, genetic or not, or something medically that's happened, or even a medication that would impact their picky eating. So think kids like kiddos who have ADHD who are on medication that impacts their appetite, or kiddos with cancer or things like that, right? And then structural functional, this is the realm of the speech language pathologist, feeding specialist. We are looking at not just the structure and function of the mouth, but really the whole body of, is your child in the proper seating position, which we call the 90-90-90 position. So 90 degrees at the hips, 90 degrees at the knees, and 90 degrees at the ankles, with the ability to ground your feet so that you're in the proper positioning and stability to be able to focus physically, structurally, anatomically on the meal and on digestion.
Amazing.
And then looking at, of course, oral motor, how is their brain to mouth movements coordinating, the sensory awareness in their mouth, that kind of thing, right? That's all structural functional. And then last, but certainly not least, the biochemical nutritional aspects of picky eating. And this is sort of the area that I feel like everyone, that's hyperbole, I shouldn't say everyone, but that many people are overlooking.
Yeah.
This is the kiddos who maybe they have a zinc deficiency, and that is distorting their senses of taste and smell, which is very possible. I see that in a lot of kids. Maybe they have some gut health stuff going on that's causing some intensive cravings or is causing food sensitivities and all the symptoms that come along with that. Maybe they have a blood sugar dysregulation issue where they're craving grazing, carby foods all day. Oh, they never want to eat a meal. They just want to graze all day and eat snacks. Well, first of all, is it positioning at the table? Second, do you have balanced meals scheduled throughout the day where your kid's not on a blood sugar roller coaster?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And of course, food, for lack of a better word, food addictions, where kiddos are biochemically driven towards certain foods to the point where they have extremely strong cravings. So think things like gluten, casein, dairy, soy, corn can do it because all those foods are very high in glutamate. So yeah, I feel like I just sort of dumped a lot on you, but that's really like the framework that I sort of go through in a very broad sense with every family that I work with and say, where is your child at on this Venn diagram, this complex picky eating paradigm? And then the why determines the how. The why determines how you follow up.
So smart. And you know what? I just think people don't think about the root cause at all. Like even you just going through all that, I'm like, it really could just be as simple as, you're spraying the Clorox and they're not sitting properly in the chair and the lights flashing and they're getting really overstimulated, and less an issue actually the food itself. And just people aren't, I mean, even me as a mother, I haven't thought about all of those different factors that could be really impacting mealtime.
Yeah, absolutely. Eating is one of the most complex tasks that we do as human beings.
Yeah.
But I think that as adults, we don't see it that way because it comes easy for us.
Yeah.
But these are kiddos learning to become humans, They're just little humans learning their way in the world. And so we have to guide them through that.
Wow, yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that diagram. I just think that alone is so helpful. I want to bottle that up with me forever. So I appreciate you sharing that. I wanted to chat a little bit also about the work that you do with children with autism and ADHD. How often are you seeing food issues kind of connected to these greater underlying health concerns? And also, how do you see big improvements in, speech and behaviors and regulations in these kiddos when addressing these root causes, like you mentioned?
hmm So I want to be really mindful here that I'm not being too blanket statement.
Sure.
But I really do feel strongly that every child or every parent who has a child with ADHD or autism should at least give the diet a go, give it a trial, a very honest trial of at least 6 months, totally and completely, whatever that looks like for you. And when I say the diet, I go to mostly organic, gluten-free, dairy-free. That's the baseline starting place. And then from there, you'd bio-individualize. But I would say at least starting there to see how your child does after a few months. I think it's absolutely worth it. The kiddos who I've seen, I haven't seen a kiddo not respond to diet yet. And the reason why I've integrated my work into parent coaching in the way that I have, and I'm no longer doing traditional speech language therapy anymore, is because I believe so strongly in this work to the point where I've changed my entire trajectory of my career.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, absolutely. I think every child with autism should have a speech language pathologist on their team. But let's say today I had a kiddo with autism personally, you bet I would be working on their diet before I go to speech therapy and or in tandem. Do you know what I mean? I consider diet and a low tox lifestyle to be absolutely foundational for these kids. And one of the big pieces of that goes back to nervous system regulation, right? If your diet or your lifestyle or what have you is creating or contributing to your nervous system being dysregulated, then you have to address that.
Sure.
Because a kiddo who's in chronic dysregulation and a state of fight or flight is not going to receive speech therapy or any other therapy or intervention as well as they would had they had the foundations in place. And I know you know that, but yeah, for those listening.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I was going to say, for those who don't know our personal story, diet was a huge factor for my brother who, was diagnosed with quote unquote severe autism and is now, an amazing 30-year-old chatting away, living, feeding chickens, and he's essentially just a little farmer and loves life. But diet was such a huge foundation, and everything that you've spoken to, Shandy, we saw that play out. And it also really impacted how I parent my children who don't have any diagnoses, but it really made me think, gosh, if the gut-brain connection is so strong that what we're feeding my brother can totally change his language output, his functioning, his mood, then surely all of us should be eating and prioritizing this low toxin lifestyle, really high quality foods to nurture our body so we can feel our best too.
100%.
Yeah, so I absolutely love the work that you do and love your viewpoint on it. We are running out of time, which is so sad because I literally feel like I could chat to you for a whole other hour. But I would love for you to just share, where can our viewers learn more about your work and your resources? I know you talk a lot about the complex pick eater stuff on your site. So please share that with us and send people where you want them to go.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bella. So my website is speakingofhealthandwellness.com. You can find all of my free resources on there. I have blogs, guides. I have a podcast of my own, as well as a course for parents where you can get support with complex picky eating is designed for kiddos with and without developmental conditions. And yeah, all of my social media handles are Speaking of Health and Wellness, and you can find those on my website as well. On the bottom, you can go click there and link to it. Yeah, Speaking of Health and Wellness.
There she is. Amazing, Shandy. Thank you so much. And we always end our segment with one question, and that's if you could give one piece of advice to a mum-to-be, so an expecting mama or someone just starting to think about conception, what would it be?
Oh, good question. Focus on your pelvic floor. I know that that's not something that we talked about here today, but as I am preparing to try to conceive myself, I am learning a lot about core and pelvic floor, and that many women don't seem to think about that until after they give birth, but it can be really helpful for women if we think about that while expecting or before. So
I love that. I love that. It is a good reminder. I don't think I was really educated at all in that before I had my first son, but I have consequently learned about it from many pregnancies. But I totally agree. It's a really crucial thing that women should get educated on and prepare prior to conception. So I love that. Shandy, thank you so much for just all your wisdom and everything you've shared today. It's been gosh, I've learned so much that I'm going to take away for my own kiddos. So I appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming on with us today. We'll have to have you back on to chat again soon.
Oh, I would love to come back on. You're most welcome. And thank you so much for inviting me.
All right. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. See you next week.
We're live.
Okay. This is Maddie Rose Johnston. Say hi.
Hi, Maddie.
Or
Rose.
smile. Give you a big smile right there to the camera. You like being on camera. Yeah.
Okay, so what's your name?
I'm Susan Johnston.
And you are mom.
I'm mom.
Okay.
Yes.
Tell us what happened. Tell us her story.
Well, of course, she's adopted. And when she was born, her mom kind of forced her to be born at that time with cocaine. And so she was born without a heartbeat or anything like that. They resuscitated her. Probably took about 25 minutes for them to give her a 4 APGAR score. So she did have a level 1 brain bleed, done by scans and everything like that. But we know with medical records that still within a couple of hours of being resuscitated, they gave her all the appropriate vaccines that they do. So fast forward a couple months in the hospital, and she had cleared her brain bleed. So they had scans that showed that her brain bleed was gone.
And was she in your care at this point?
No, not yet. They did put a G-tube in because basically birth mom stayed there to help take care of her, and it just wasn't going well, and so they just put in a feeding tube. 3.5 months we got her, brought her home, and we got her to eat by bottle. We got her at least 80 cc's of feeding, and then we'd finish in the G-tube.
But no diagnosis of cerebral palsy.
Well, they said she might, just because of the level 1 brain bleed. But I know cerebral palsy has multiple, degrees to it. And so she would keep her head up. We have pictures of her sucking on her hands. We have grasping toys. She almost rolled over at about 6 months. And then the day, August 20th, 2015, and because she's foster care, they forced us to go ahead and give her vaccines.
At 2 months.
This is now we're up to we're 6.5 months, with 3 months being in our care.
She had not had vaccines before?
No, she had all the. They gave her everything they could in the hospital, and so I don't really remember anything that night. But we could not wake her in the morning after the DTaP. So
that's the only one she had that day?
Yes, because I knew by this time to delay them. And I would fight with the pediatrician, and so it was just the D-tab that day. And could not rouse her. When we could rouse her, it didn't seem like she could hear. We were, doing all sorts of things to see if, loud noises shocked her, nothing. And then she would just kind of, don't want to say comatose, but just would not wake up, and when she did wake up, she was very lethargic. And I guess just through some friends of mine, I found a homeopathic doctor that treated her that night. We did the Epsom salts bath, and we did the, I don't know what else she gave her. It's such a blur. But at that point, she stopped putting her hands midline, stopped eating, stopped trying to roll over. She did seem to get like her hearing back and everything. We went to the pediatricians on Monday, not because of the weekend. Told to our face she was vaccine injured, but if you go back and look in the medical records, it says mom comes in complaining of a vaccine injury, and that's all it says. But because she had had a brain scan before she was sent home, I convinced the same neurologist to do another one, and you could see clearly that her brain scans went down. Is it the amplitude of it or something like that? But she was here, and it went down, and basically the neurologist cried. He was so sad that because he had seen the progress that she had been making, and just we've continued to try and detox things out of her, because she was still foster care. We did have to get a few more vaccines along the way, which I went straight to detoxing right afterwards, and when we adopted her at 3, we totally stopped all vaccinations. And she does roll over now. In fact, she rolls all across the floor if she wants to, but that didn't happen until she was about 3 years old, close to 3 years old, so all that delayed. She still really won't put her hands midline. She might grab her hair, but you can see her hands stay far out. So, and they just treat it as cerebral palsy from birth, but I know what it was. We know what it was.
You think the DTaP just was the
yes.
to the head, if you like, the last thing that finished it?
Yes. So, not that we knew. I mean, it could have been the very first one they gave her in the hospital. That could have done it. That could have done partially. Could just, progressively gotten worse along the way, and the DTaP just finished that off.
So what's a day in her life like for her?
Today's a really bad day to ask that. It's been a hard day. She is a relatively happy kid. She has a great smile. Will you show your smile? Her brother calls it her spiritual gift, because when she smiles at you, everybody just lights up. Her friends at church try and get her to smile on purpose, and it's like, yay, she smiled for us. You on there? So she's typically happy. She loves watching TV. She loves watching people. She's a people watcher. But I'm older. She's getting heavier. It can get hard. But we've pretty much, to keep her healthy, we keep her out of the hospital. And so we try to, go all natural that we can now. It's been an education for me, and just, juggling a cold. She did get flu B and pneumonia at Christmas time. And if you can imagine, I got it also, but for her, it's like a 3-week process, just trying to keep her fevers down so she doesn't have seizures, she has a hard time coughing, so it's really hard that way. She can't blow her nose, and so you're just managing. It can be exhausting.
Do you have help?
My husband. So
Is there anything else you want to tell everybody?
Well, we appreciate what you do. So it's, nice to know that people are there to just encourage you. That's all. Yeah.
Well, we appreciate you looking after her. I mean, it's
She's a blessing.
beautiful.
Yeah. Wait until she smiles. One smile. We get one smile.
Oh,
No.
one smile.
One smile, Maddie Rose. No.
There's a lot going on in this bunch.
Yeah. Yeah. So, she understands everything.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you saw the communication device
Yeah.
that.
She was, for people listening, she was communicating with us with her communication device.
Yeah.
outside. So.
Yep.
But yes, it's tragic, is it not, what they've done to these children?
Yeah.
But at least we have her.
Yeah.
Like these babies here.
She is a blessing.
Thank you for coming and telling your story.
Thank you
Sitting
for
on the bus.
letting us.
You can sign the bus.
All right. You going to sign the bus?
This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.